遇见有趣的灵魂，活出真实的自己。大家好，欢迎来到谈心社，让我们一起谈心、谈情、谈音乐。Welcome to Generous Talk, an intercultural conversation on music, health, and lifestyle. Enjoy.
Hi everyone, this is Xingyu, and we have Tim today join us, and we are beloved mentor, everything, mentor, role model, teacher, everything, Dr. Kathleen Howland. Woo.
Among the absolute best of us, we love her so much.
Well, what a beautiful way to start the day. What a beautiful way to start the day. I'm going back to bed. It can't get any better than this.
You are going to bed. And then after this, we're going to bed. So it was a nice, sweet dream. There's a little, so talking about bed, there was, I think, little interesting moment I had with Kathleen was I literally had a dream one night a couple of weeks ago. It was so vivid that I dreamed of being with the same conference room with Kathleen and seeing you smile, and we're talking about something with music, neuroscience, as we always talk about together. It was such a just warm and tender feeling when I in the dream and also waking up. And then I decided to write you an email saying, let's get the podcast going. And what's crazier is you wrote back to me and saying you are actually that same time, I think it was the same day that you were actually in our neuroscience conference in Cambridge. I was like, wow, I love that synchronicities.
Oh, the synchronicities.
Yes. So I probably was there in spirit. Maybe that's the conference.
Clearly not bound by hemispheres or country borders. Yeah, that was a beautiful conference.
Yeah. So for a proper introduction, so our dear Kathleen Howland is a mute therapist and speech language pathologist with 40 years of practice experiences. Also teach at the liberal arts so teach music therapy and liberal arts at Berklee College of Music in Boston, specializing in the biological connection between music and other essential brain functions like emotions, movement, language, and cognition. And I first, so as I was preparing for this meeting today, this memory, came back to me as how I first met Kathleen was September 2014, my first semester at Berklee. And I walked into this warm, cozy 7 Harborland Street. That's where the music therapy department, our home is. And it was my first semester and first time ever being in a total new country by myself. And I went for jazz and music therapy. And I wanted to know, what is the end, what will it look like by the end of the journey as, go through the music therapy training at Berklee. Because there was so little information that we could get, back then in China. And I walked into the office and you were right there. And I asked you were teaching the most advanced level class, the music and medicine class, for the program, and I asked you, oh, can I sit in your class? And you said, absolutely. And I become the freshman who's sitting in the senior class for the entire semester. And I was like, that's the program I want to enroll in. And this is a teacher I want, study from and grow with. Yes.
I remember thinking how courageous you were to come around the world on your own, how difficult it was to come into a whole other language and culture. And I greatly admired the work that you did. Your English exploded across the years that I knew you, because you were always putting yourself into situations of deep learning. And you worked 3 times harder than anybody else because of that. But I just really admired your courage.
Thank you. So is there a song? I will invite you to share a piece of music of a song as a music introduction of you today. What would you bring to us?
I think the song that always comes up for me is one I used a lot in music therapy, and I especially used during my own cancer treatment, because there were over 15 months of chemotherapy. There were days that I did not want to go anymore, and I was done, and I was frustrated. And so I would have, honestly, a little tantrum in my bedroom of stomping and hitting the pillows and saying, I don't want to go. And I had to do it all that angst, all that anger, all that distress, I had to be perfectly quiet with, because my daughter, who was 5 or 6 at the time, was on the other side of that door. So all of this was this raging, but I had to get it out and I had to be quiet. And then when my alarm rang, which meant it was time to go to the hospital, I would sing this. When you walk through the storm, hold your head up high, and you won't be afraid of the dark, 'cause at the end of the storm, there is a golden sky, in the sweet silver song of the lark. I'll walk on through the wind, I'll walk on through the rain, though my dreams be tossed and blown. I'll walk on with hope in my heart, and I never walk alone. No, I'll never walk alone. It always reminded me that I never did. I had to take the treatment alone, but I never had to walk that journey alone. And it gave me courage. And I went out with a smile on my face. So I acknowledge that as the most perfect song. Even though I don't believe in any one song having particular power, I do acquiesce with that song having a very, very strong sense of power in its message and in its tenderness.
Well, now I'm immersed in this tenderness.
Right. I think right now we're immersed in that frequency. Absolutely. In the frequency of Kathleen Howland. That's beautiful. Thank you for sharing. Actually, I never heard that song before, actually.
It's a Rodgers and Hammerstein song from Carousel. And I encourage you and your listeners to listen to all the variations of it, because typically it's done with orchestration that creates the chills. There's this tremendous build. You can hear it in Elvis Presley. You can hear it in Judy Garland. You can hear it in Renee Fleming. But the version that really reached me was Johnny Cash at the end of his life, when he had Parkinson's and his voice was restricted. And it's also a song that elders in the US, certainly elders that are now, if I'm 60, that are probably 70, 80 and above, they would remember that song. But it has so much power because of the chills that when I used it in hospice, it's contraindicated to have things with chills happening in hospice because people are just so emotional anyhow. We need to offer them at that time. But there was a man who was in desperate states within hours of dying, and he was in terrific distress. And I came into the house and he was honestly vomiting from his lungs, which I had never seen before. And so he couldn't breathe and he couldn't choke. And we got him to the place of emptying, but I held his hands and I sang that song to him really, really quietly. And because it was so quiet, he had to work really hard to hear me. And that slowed his breathing down. And I made my breath really audible. So he started to breathe with me. I'd raise his hands. And then he went to sleep. He went to sleep. And his wife is saying, oh my God, I can't believe he went to sleep. Oh my God. And it was one of the most precious moments. I didn't even have my coat off. I didn't even have the guitar off my back. But the immediacy of that message that he wasn't alone, that I am entering his world as a stranger. He's not alone. His wife was there, but she was so frantic. God love her. How could she not be? Mm-hmm. And so then she and I went off and had our own experience in music and in heartfelt sharing. But he got some rest. And in that time, she realized that she had forgotten music, that she had forgotten his music, his love of music, and their children were coming to say goodbye to their dad. And so we began to help organize the music that would greet them and that would sustain him for the rest of his journey. Mm-hmm. So I do think it's the most perfect song that ever was.
Wow. That also triggers a lot of memories of me, how, work with, so I started a music therapy journey because there were a lot of things happening in my life. I feel like it was kind of my destiny kind of led me into it. For example, my grandpa had Alzheimer's disease for 3 years. Before I knew music therapy was a profession, I find, that the only way could get him connect with us again, not lost in the disease, and get him like engaged. And he was very athletic, but then because of the dementia, he lost his ability, motivation to move at all. But it was only like music was the only thing that we were able to connect with him again, and also get him to be back to the self he truly was. And that's one of the incidents that got me interested. Okay, what's really happening here, to help them. And then I work with hospice patients, as went through my training. What's like so precious was, so I was like very similar experience you had to, in those moments, tender moments, to connect the seniors with their family who didn't know what to do at all. And then when I finished my internship, I went back home for 2 months to meet my family and the rest. And then my other granddad from my dad's side, he was rushing to hospital. I think he met me, and then I feel like he was waiting to see me. And then he was rushing to hospital, and we knew that the doctor just said, gather everyone, he won't be out probably this time. And then I was like, I realized, wow, now I'm using all my training experience helping others. It's like a full circle.
Mhm.
With my granddad on my mother's side, then I work in my clinical work, and now I finished my training, and with all that, I got my family, started playing music, um, and I got to know my granddad in a level that he started sharing, even sharing like moments that those memory that his children never heard about. I feel like we were able to connect in a very deep level. And then there was also emergency with a drop, of oxygen level, and it was a crisis moment that the doctor, they were, we need to decide whether, they will use like injection or like machine to, get his heart rate back to normal. And as they're debating which was the best way, I step in and play and sing music at his side, like the one you were just describing, like very close, like tender, next to his ears. And while I'm looking at the monitor to match his breathing, heartbeat, and 40 minutes later, he was totally fine, and happy, like smiling and breathing, regularly, and his oxygen level was back to the safe range. And then the nurse came in. They were about to use the machine, and they were shocked. What happened here?
Mhm.
Like, and then the people around like, oh, this girl just played music with him, and he's like all calm and look good again. It was all those, yeah, those moments. And it's all these circle. And then I guess my question would be like, how, and like you have over like 40 years of experience, how did you start it? What got you in getting you get you into the music therapy, and then how your relationship with music kind of evolve and change throughout those years.
Oh my gosh. I would say, and I think this is an interesting question to ask a class on the first day. What is your earliest music memory? And it may be one that's told to you because of how young you were. So my mother would say she would put me in a playpen, like a little kitty crate, and so that she could get things done. And she'd put me in front of the TV, but I was not attentive and I was not willing to remain incarcerated. But noticed that I was more settled when the commercials were on, and she realized that's where the music was. So then she started to put me in front of a radio when she needed to do errands. And then I would say years later, in just witnessing power. Okay, so I was born into the world with a higher aptitude to for music, for I want more and more and more of that. And then my father, I can remember I was maybe 7, 8 years old, and my father could be an intense guy, and he just had like a very difficult ride home, maybe an hour and a half from work. And now 2 hours later, we have ridden to Cape Cod, which you may remember, in Massachusetts, to his parents' home. And so sometimes you were on, like walking on glass around whether he was going to speak short or be kind or whatever. And so he had all this tension in his face, and my grandmother was Norwegian and she would play Grieg. And so I'm watching my father, and his face is starting to melt as she plays. And I'm looking more and more at kind of his essential self, not like the guy that just went through a week of work and all of this stuff, carrying the load. And and then finally his jaw would slacken and he'd go to sleep. And I'm looking at her and I'm looking at him and I'm looking at her and I'm looking. Wow, that was so cool. So I think for me, finding the place that music could grab somebody's attention or not grab their attention, let him go into rest. I think, so much of what I talk about in the classroom and beyond is the way that music upregulates and downregulates us, and how we can use that with intentionality to push the needle in the direction that we need to go.
Mm-hmm.
So
So
how
does
that?
yes, and how does that, so that was, at a young age, observation, like your observation skill is right there, and so that was a kind of earliest memory, and so as you go into the field, then how does that relationship evolve and change with music?
It only deepened because the population that I served for the first many years of developing my craft were people in an institution. And so they had intellectual deficits, and I worked on the unit called the infirmary, which meant that they were more medically involved. So there was higher staff ratio with nurse. So there's 24/7 nursing. There's occupational speech and physical therapy on the unit, music therapy. And so with nonverbal people, I really learned to watch the body. I really learned for all of the different ways that we have to communicate. And for me to use music to generate communication with them, to see the kind of responses you could get. And honestly, I would be like in my studio and they're flourishing in music. And then outside of music, it was just yin and yang. It was black and white. It was so contrastive. And I was beguiled as to how these two presentations could exist in one person. I couldn't understand it. And it was then that really led me to want to understand the brain. And that was like 20 years before brain imaging technology really came on, before research came on. I just was I might find one study in a year from around, that was it. There was one study published in 1974, and I clung on to that until all the little characters of the typing fell off the page because I had overused and overloved that one study. But there was precious little, but I was looking at this contrastiveness, and because of the way that they functioned so beautifully in music, and then so with so many constraints outside of music, it helped really hone my ability to observe. And so I spend, most of my day observing gait. I'm leaving the train and I'm looking like, that's really an interesting gait. And I'm trying to take little films that I think I can use in the classroom because they're just so interesting to me. But I love to think about thinking, and I love to, how do I know that my students are with me, are with the information, not just through questions I may ask them or tests they could take. I don't give tests, but what am I seeing in their eyes? What am I seeing in their eyes that let me know that they are with me? If they're not, what can I do to help them push through fatigue or lack of attention? So now I encourage people to say, could we please have a break? And I go over and I thank them. Like I want to thank you, self-regulating. I want to honor the fact that you're self-regulating and what that means to how much you value your education. So I've really tried to flip that classroom around, and I just follow eyes, and then the information and inspiration follow.
Yeah, I remember in the class we had, you have you had a lot of those, babies videos and people in different situations using music, and you play those because that it was, I think that generates a happy, fun like feeling. I feel that was enhancing the learning because those create strong memories. Those strong emotions create strong memories. And then I remember those times there where you had the music on and we all just get up dancing.
Yeah. Stories illuminate facts. When you read, and I dread and dislike when people say cold hard facts or the cold hard science. It isn't. The story is told in science, but the films really show that in a human way that allows it to be more accessible. And frankly, for us to be in awe, because when you look at the musicality of children, you better understand how there's that musicality for a lifetime, across a lifetime, that we are blessed to have so many innate capacities for music. And since you were both in the classroom, the research has taken a really, really strong focus now that you need to be musical in order to develop cognition and language.
Wow. Tell us more about that.
It's amazing. So some of the favorite things that I see, first off, understanding that children are innately born with musical capacities, with music perception capacities. At birth, they can recognize a rhythm pattern that's been interrupted and respond. And we didn't know, there's no amount of observation skills that can help you understand why a newborn baby, how they are responding to music. But now we have research paradigms that allow us to see it, because this was done with newborn sleeping babies, where they put electrodes, auditory evoked potentials up their auditory pathway to test hearing. So hearing is so essential to brain function that every child born in this country, and I hope in any country, are given a universal hearing screening. Not vision. Excellent. We don't do vision, but we do hearing. And when they use that same test to watch and read the electrical activity going up the brainstem, they put in rhythm patterns and then disrupted them in awkward places. The baby brain doesn't respond to what's expected and what's predictable, but it responds to what's missing, and it spikes activity. So now that we have these technologies and research designs, we can see how musical babies are at birth and really in utero. But in terms of aligning cognition, here's one I love. Kathleen Wormke from Germany has done studies collecting babies' cooing sounds. And has them. Can you imagine music students taking dictation? And
that cooing sound, wow.
And what she's found and reported beautifully is that children vocalize in musical intervals. But then where it got even to the next level is if the cooing of a 2 and 4 month old baby don't show much variety in the vocalization patterns, it implies how they're perceiving sound. And so what they see is if you have a limited range of vocalizations, that they will show up with a language delay at age 2. We actually have a biomarker.
Wow.
So first music, then language. Now we've even seen first music, then literacy. So at the age of 3, we can use tests with children. Boo, 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 boo. And if a child says they're the same when they're different, which is what a 3-year-old can do, the lower their score in music means the higher the probability that they will be dyslexic. And in order to be identified as dyslexic, you have to be at least 2 years behind the country. in your reading status. So you're a fourth grader reading at a second or first grade level.
That's
And
too late.
it's
right.
we don't have a good way to undo that.
Yeah.
But now we have a biomarker of prediction of who's at risk. And the treatment, assuredly, I mean, all of this is so new that the treatment hasn't been worked out. But I will say, assuredly, the treatment is early childhood music education. And the works, music together and kinder music, have been inspired and informed by neuroscience and the works of Edwin Gordon and Kodai and Dalcroze, who were early great observers of children. That's all you need to do. Plug the children in, let them have fun, let their ears get tuned, and then give them this leg up. So that's new, brilliant work.
So,
wow.
if I may.
Yes.
So Kathleen, you were such a master advocator. I would say a master advocator, for music education. I'm just so curious, how would you go about advocating for, early childhood music education, as a treatment?
Yeah. I'm in a unique position here in my community because 5, maybe 6 years ago, I ran for school committee. So in the US, each school system has a school committee, and our job is the budget and policy and hiring the superintendent and firing the superintendent. So every month I take meetings that multiple meetings. And so one of the subcommittees I joined was the one for special needs. And I have been working the superintendent and working him to start looking at a 3-year-old testing. I send him studies. I generally once a year, we have a sit down meeting together. And he's such a lovely guy. We go for walks, but I assigned him readings for that meeting. And so across time, advocacy happens across time, right? Goes and hears something once and changes their behaviors or changes policies. So I'm in a position where I can speak consistently to this. I'm in a position of influence, and I use it to this end. Because I had a student do a presentation last semester and talked about how the rate of dyslexia was double for people who were incarcerated. And actually, up to 90% of all people incarcerated in this country are illiterate. For them, think about, I think there must be a huge connection between the lousy self-esteem of a kid who can't read at 3rd grade level, in the way that they develop as humans, as hurt humans. We just went to the funeral of a 28-year-old neighbor here who had very much had learning difficulties, very much had attention deficit. And in the school system, that's just too far out of that sausage grinder that we want to put everybody through.
Oh
and
my God, that metaphor.
Yeah, and he just overdosed and lost his life at 28. I think that the way that learning disabilities impact children is really my hypothesis is it's at the root for both. So I know that just hearing that student, because you all teach me, hearing that student in December has altered my retirement plans, where I want to work with women who are incarcerated and teach them how to read, and teach them to read songbooks. So these lovely books now that are made around songs, whether it's Imagine or Don't Worry, Be Happy, or I will make some of them, teaching them to read by helping their memory with song lyrics, teaching them to read so they read to their children, which will help them each co-regulate one another, to up and down regulate themselves. So that has become one of the major goals of my retirement now, is to help people learn to read functionally. I don't think as an incarcerated adult, your ability to unlock the keys to that kingdom are fully yours, because of developmental windows, right? Critical developmental windows. But to make it functional in the way that women influence children, I can do that. I can definitely.
Wow.
And I think that that's really, I just can't wait to get to that place where I can do these kinds of things.
Wow.
Ooh, that's wonderful. That's beautiful. Fantastic. Thank you.
Well,
Yeah.
to Ella Shalev, who brought all of this to my attention, bless her. And she's like the two of you. I just can't wait to see where she goes.
All right.
Thank you.
I guess us too, Ella Shalev.
Yeah.
We're looking out for you if you ever listen to
Yeah.
this.
And right, like talk like the hype. I'm like kind of think about the hypothesis that you talk about, right? And I feel it's so recently also I look at there was a compassion project for you know, male prisoners, and so their you know, their really mission is, you know, we need to help those people by recognizing it was not them want to be violent and doing crime, but it was all the trauma that they endure since childhood, and that's acting out, right? And if they say like, because trauma really ruins someone's self-esteem, how they see themselves, how they connect with other people, and right, not be able to learn and be put down or locked down since childhood, that's a part of the trauma also. If a child, yeah, can establish and really have a sense of very stable self, then we can, it's a foundation. There's no foundation we can build anything on. Yeah.
Nobody gets to prison because they were well loved.
Yeah.
Nobody gets there because of secure attachments with the people that were supposed to take care of them and rely on them. And that happens when you're an infant, and it either happens that you're attached securely and people meet your needs, or you're insecure in your attachment, and that is not plastic. There's no amount of love after the fact of that, I think, that can reverse that critical window of feeling like you belong and that your needs and desires are heard and they're met. So there's a film that I love that changed my life called The Dhamma Brothers, Dhamma. And what they did was they went into one of the worst cell blocks in the country. These were all people who didn't have a prayer of getting out of prison. We got their stories, and they all had signed into doing a 10-day silent meditation, I think it is. It's the Vipassana, 10 or 12 days. And you watch the changes, the behavioral changes in their life, yes. But to me, the behavioral changes indicate cellular level changes in their upregulated limbic system. That trauma that always has their blood pressure higher than it because of trauma, and unforgivingness and retribution and all of that. And you see their lives changed. And recently there was a screening of a film that I went to on music therapy with veterans.
Oh,
and one
yes.
of the filmmakers and I got into a very intense talk because he flunked high school 4 times. He can't read. He can't read the slides that he used in this presentation or that were used. This beautiful, beautiful, beautiful man who was incarcerated at 17, a full decade before we would expect he had executive functions, where he would understand the consequences of his behavior, where he would have that bigger worldview. He was incarcerated. until he was 25, and then spent 20 years on parole. He taught me so much in a few minutes. Well, we talked and talked, but it was still just a few minutes about his life. And I was talking to him about the impact of reading on him. And it's just, it's really important, I think, first off, to really, I love that the name is With Compassion, because we have to recognize the really damaged humanity that was damaging, but we need to go back and find ways to help release the trauma rather than the punitive, the punitive system that we have in the US, which is just despicable. Recently, I was listening to Ear Hustle, which is a podcast from San Quentin Prison, and they contrasted with how Americans do prison with the way Norwegians do prison. And you would have music there, you would have literacy training, you would have compassion is the way the system is built, not the way that you try to come in and change the system. It's the way the system was built. So I think humanity, but it starts when you've got a tender 7, 8, 9-year-old kid and the way that they think about themselves. And that's where love has to be central to teaching, because too many of those people report a cutting remark by somebody, and that's what they remember. And then they grow themselves around those remarks.
What is I think we touched a bit on, but when I studied with you, I knew you were one of the 7 people in the US who have both credential in music therapy and speech language. I don't know how maybe there are more people right now, but what is it like for you to live in both worlds and bridging them, connecting them?
For me, there are about a dozen now. I'm still the only one at the doctoral level. For me, it's a thrill because I feel like I'm one-stop shopping, and I can cull resources from both. And it's always deeply informed my practice, for sure. There's so much that they go hand in hand. And what I see now is that the American Speech and Hearing Association in the US has been deeply challenging to the American Music Therapy Association, calling for encroachment, seeking to restrict our practice and our scope of practice. And so for me, as a bridge builder by nature, this has been really important to me. And there are more retirement plans wrapped into that. But being able to speak, to empower, to speak, to bring people together for the benefit of the patients that we can serve, rather than spending time apart and fighting. I've seen. And it's our patients that miss out. It's the patients that don't get to benefit from the practices that we both can bring. So, and in my work and in my future work, especially in retirement, I will be looking to enhance the musicality and the usage of a speech therapist musicality in sessions, and that I'm working to advance the understanding of communication disorders with the music therapists so that they are more deeply skilled. And that's really critical to me.
Wow. I'm imagining what those change, what kind of impact those change, gonna bring.
I think there were about 200,000 or in that environment in ASHA, and there were 9,000 music therapists. There is this seminal moment. I think particularly with NIH now involved in using their great big lens and resources to study music therapy and music-based interventions. because 9,000 of us are not enough to treat people that are there. I mean, there are 1 million people in this country alone with Parkinson's disease. 1 million. So I think it's right and just to empower other people and honor their own musicality. And pretty soon they're going to find the place where clinically they can't go any further. And then know richly about music therapy and the opportunity to bring us in and leverage our knowledge in those moments. And I think that to me looks like the future of music therapy.
Wow.
That we will provide more consultation, leadership, mentorship, that we will honor everybody's musicianship and musicality, that we will help them. Gosh, I mean, if I'm working with speech therapists and they're working with children, a ukulele, 4 chords, 500 songs, 1,000 songs, you know, that's what they need to keep a child engaged, and the hard work of repeating speech sounds so that their speech is more clear. And so I think that that is a right and just thing to do with my training and my belief in musicality being normally distributed. 96% of us are average, above average, or below average. So let's just help people be their musical best selves, which then also brings us into the broader conversation of advocating for K-12 music education.
Yeah. It's I think it's like because it's still privilege, right, for a child to have access to adequate music education from, I think, things birth. Even when they're in the womb, to show the parents how to incorporate music into connecting with the baby in the womb. You know, 3-month fetus already can hear sound and start to. Is that 3 months? No.
3rd trimester.
And what if every child or what if every fetus they're starting from their parents have those knowledge, right, to be able to create that emotional bond with their child, and then continue to grow that bond. And because I'm working with a lot of so adults who had a lot of relational trauma, they're in their early 20s, 30s, or children who, you know, their parents would call and ask for help because the parents doesn't know how to provide that secure, stable, nurturing relationship for the kids, and now they're in crisis. So I work with all these people and always think about, you know, there are so many more. It's like very much a societal problem I see. And I always think about what are some kind of large scale things we could do as a music therapy with the knowledge we have that could actually help millions and billions of people.
No. I mean, you're so right that creating a relationship with the baby. So when I was pregnant, I knew all of this information, this research, because I was an older mother. I was 43, right? And I was like, woohoo, I have my own little case study.
Little case study.
Yeah. So before I would go to sleep, before, say I was shooting for 10 a.m. to kind of be asleep, then at 9 a.m., I'm listening to music that's kind of medium energy, but then downscaling to being sedative. So then my baby at the beginning of 3rd trimester is hearing the music. And as my physiology starts to get more downregulated and there's the music, she starts to become conditioned to that response because of our shared physiology. So when it was time for her to sleep on her own, which is a transition for children, or it was time to go to sleep, or she woke up in the middle of the night and she didn't need to be changed, she just woke up, I'd put that music on and she'd go, Burr. She would go to sleep. So then you think about, okay, with understanding the impact of music on a developing fetus, how a fetus is, that's the only sense I mean, there is smell, we understand now, I just read, but in the womb, but sound is really being developed, and that development is developing the brain. And so it's wiring the brain to perceive patterns, because that's what our brains do. They're pattern perceiving organs. So with this information, I would start working with at-risk mothers, at risk for domestic abuse, at risk for homelessness. You take this beautiful information to the people who need to be lifted the most. And you create this in our urban and suburban settings. And so again, it's a beautiful thing, because here is a mother doing this for a child, because a mother will do anything for their child. But then here is that mutual relationship where the mother learns to self-regulate. And a mother at risk probably has not been gifted with that either.
Yep.
Regulate, because that's what parents do for children. Children cry, parents help them self-regulate until they learn to do that for themselves. Here, you're going to release all the oxytocin of bonding. You're going to release the dopamine of pleasure that reinforces all of these behaviors. And all we have to do is figure out how to get music to them. I think songwriting is important so that we don't just lay in, here's sedative music, here's your sedative playlist. But what is the message you have for your child? And how do we embed that in a song? Because in under a half an hour, you can write a lullaby with somebody. You can help somebody generate that. And lullabies are the just right patterns for developing brains to really attach to and have long-lasting memories with. Let's just do that. I think having those type of programs at Rosie's Place, which is the Center for Homeless Women in the city of Boston, that should be key. Every woman should have their own customized lullaby, even if it's a single word that they put in. All you need is, what do you need, honey? Hope? Okay, all you need is hope. Let's do that. I give you hope, baby. I hope for this. I hope for that. That's their lullaby.
Yeah, I'm thinking of the clients I'm working with now in China, and they probably will not be called at risk, but I think I see that, and also a lot of other kind of, we would have diagnosis, say, oh, someone experiencing depression, someone experiencing a self-sabotage sometimes, even like those kind of behavior, or just feeling anxious when they receive a big opportunity, but they just feel froze, not sure. It's all those like way of going down deep, is like, how do we recognize our feeling and regulate ourselves, like going down to these skills. And then when I work with people, maybe sometimes on the surface we will see maybe it's the problem I just described, but when we go deep, it's always finding that it's the early development of that relationship, that the ability, the experience of self-regulation, it was not there, and these people are not in the society not called at risk. It's just daily, like everyday people you meet, you see. And that's where I have the concern. I see this is a really that's another like kind of pandemic of those relational trauma, and
I think the answer is, you're not at risk, and they're at risk in adulthood, those situations, or adolescence. What if music education in middle school, where the national standards here in the US have students learning about composition? What if every middle schooler learned to compose a play song and a lullaby? Those are both easy forms to learn and highly successful. And now each of them has created their own lullaby and play song. They also happen to be the babysitters of the day. What if we empower them through a music education that would last a lifetime to have their own songs, and they do that? And then you look at Thich Nhat Hanh's beautiful work in meditation practice, where you meditated to the 5-year-old that your parent was.
Oh, wow. Tell us more details.
What if you sang the lullaby that every child deserves to know how to write to your 5-year-old parent or whomever let you down? What if, because I think that psychotherapy can only go so far, because the limbic system is so powerful in its emotions and memories, in its upregulatedness, that cognition, which is much later to evolve, which is much weaker in retrospect, in contrast, that words don't get at that wiring, that cellular level wiring. And so singing does. Meditation also does, apparently, from Dharma Brothers, which I absolutely 100% believe. And the only other thing in the world to me that's as powerful as music is meditation. But
combine the two.
In what?
Let's combine the two.
Yes,
that's my big interest these days is meditation. That's what I'm super into.
That's wonderful. That's wonderful to hear, Tim. So if you look at this beautiful practice by Thich Nhat Hanh, and you end up singing to this person that wronged you, and if you didn't see them as this wronging adult, but as a wronged child, and you sang to them, what would that do to limbic system regulation? What would that do to the conversation of forgiveness? What would that do to and I would follow somebody's blood pressure across that, because it's shown in people who don't, that when people talk about originating incidences, traumatizing incidences, their blood pressure goes up necessarily as they remember all of this. But where the research I think is really illuminating is after they've talked about that, their blood pressure stays up, go back down. If they have a forgiving personality, it goes down. If they don't have a forgiving personality, it stays. So how can we use the music to help them in that conversation of forgiveness? It could be by marrying this Thich Nhat Hanh practice to music. And that would change. And you can, even as I'm talking about it, I'm starting to rock gently, which
yes, I see that.
I need to be aware of that. But it is that feeling, and that is so fundamental to the human system, to how we're wired for self-regulation. It's even interesting that a mother or that a baby only sees about a foot 14 inches, which is the space that we have when we rock them. So, all of these things to me tie together biologically. And if we can use all of these resources, if every child has a K-12 education, well, let's leverage that for the well-being of now and in the future, and for every child that they have the opportunity to influence across a lifetime. And I spoke about this recently at school committee. They were doing graduation credit requirements, 8 semesters math, 8 semesters English, 8 semesters, oddly enough, 6 for languages, even though most kids take 8, 1 for the arts. And I said, y'all, I'm seeing all of these semesters related to vocation, but I'm seeing this requirement related to avocation, to a life well lived, to a life well loved. When will we get to the point where there's more equity into that?
Yeah. What's the ultimate goal of getting a job? It's happiness, right? It's not to get a job and to get a job. That's not the goal. I feel the education system is it's mismatching. Like what is the real important thing?
And we celebrate when, we've got 60% of the high school going into engineering and math. Okay, well, where is the avocation development? Because work only lasts so long. And I find it interesting. It seems like the generation of students now are not settled for just getting a job and gutting it out 9 to 5 for the next 5 years. And I'm telling you, I'm at the end of my work time, and it has this long grind, but I worked in an area of tremendous growth and development for me personally and professionally. My parents were accountants, and there's none of that. So they learned accounting in 1958. Tax laws changed, but nothing else about the practice changes. You're doing the same thing over and over. You're cross-footing ledgers. You're summarizing, business plans. It's, they loved it, but really at the end of it, my mother could scream right now if she ever sees another ledger. It's, but where are the hobbies that allow you to lead a life? So we know well aging is related to cognitive and social engagement. And so I would hope literature would give you that your high school training gave you a love of reading and a desire to use reading as a portal for inspiration and information. I'm not sure that's the case. Many of this generation of students tell me they don't read books. They're not interested in reading books. So that gift didn't get given, but even so, that's not social unless you're in a book club. As an elder, where are the engagements that allow you to live well? Because we know that for people who are not cognitively or socially engaged in both directions, it increases your risk for dementia by 40%.
And
So
your longevity.
And if you live a long life like that,
Does it really count as life?
So I think that's why I've always loved studying the lifespan, because I keep looking at what's shown now in this aging research, particularly for well aging and the tsunami rays across the planet. If they had a music education growing up that they can reconnect with, then they can continue in adulthood, late adulthood, having so much fun. I mean, you walk into a choir, you have 35 new friends. You have 50 new friends. You know how that goes. It's remarkable. And I think that K-12 education should prepare people for a lifespan, not just a working life.
Yeah, indeed. I envision a world that's filled with musicians who, given the gift to use music to increase their well-being, connection, happiness, all that. And we have a long way to go, and especially what I'm seeing here, we have education, music education in China, but the music program is designed in such a way it's not about this intrinsic motivation that how you enjoy and really like all we talk about to improve yourself in life, but it's so catered towards, you need to get this concept right, you need to perform perfectly, you need to get the certificate, you get a extra credit to get into a better school when you graduate. It's all that. I would say 99% of the music education right now is that. So I call it like, that's really fake music education. It's not real music education. And I hope this episode kind of can create more like ripple effect to show people why is this so important. Like I feel it's so much more, especially weird, we just see how technology, AI, all those developing and taking over those repetitive job, and we need to teach people from a young age how to enjoy, live a fulfilling life, rather than teaching those skills that AI is going to take over.
I do think that in my review and readings in anthropology and evolutionary biology, I think what's clear is evolution hasn't stopped. Because we are vertical and our larynges descended, that we're done evolving. We're not, and we're under environmental pressures like at any other time. We're under environmental pressures with COVID, with climate change. And so to me, we will either move in one of two directions, which is survival or not, because that's what evolution always has been. And in order to move forward, it would be about leading a better quality life. It would be about a quality of life that's led with compassion and empathy instead of hoarding toilet tissue.
Or hoarding money, right? Like now, like people, like a lot of people has this greed of money that, I don't know, just they won't be able to use it at all, but they would hoard it and still feel fear of like giving.
The fear of not enough. And in order for our species to survive, we do need to come together with a declaration of interdependence. I need you. I am not walking alone. I, have this way of seeing the world through this lens that we will either survive by working together, by coming to a place of understanding, or it will look like the January 6th insurrection, more broadly, more contentiously. I will have to say that during COVID, the school committee in our area voted to eliminate the name of the high school mascot, which was the tomahawks, which is an Indian tool, Native American tool, often associated with violence. And so the Native Americans in this area have asked us no longer to use these mascots and names. And so we, as a school committee, sought to retire that in this diversity, equity, inclusion environment of tenderness and consideration about all the things we've done and taken for granted. So we did retire the mascot of the tomahawk. And in the middle of a pandemic, you can't believe how much life force people were using to fight us over this, how vitriolic it was. How even the messages from a student whose father was unbelievably vitriolic, the way they spoke to us was shocking. It was shocking. So that's, if we're moving in that direction under the environmental pressures of the day, like any other species, we may survive. But if we move in the direction of human kindness, of humankind, if we move in the direction of empathy and compassion and lifting the people who really just got screwed in this world for whatever reason, if we lift them with the beauty and power of music, with the beauty and power of meditation, we could transform our world, just like that prisoners, that group of prisoners were transformed within the same system. I don't believe in top-down evolution anymore. I don't believe that governments will get this right. I don't believe the UN will get this right. But I do believe in bottom-up revolution, that the more people like you, the two of you, my great stars, are out in the world trying to work and reach people with these messages, that I will bank the future of my life and my child's life on. And that's what has to happen. And music is a force for good.
Thank you. Wow, beautiful. I'm thinking we can end today's session with a little song actually I learned in my practicum 4 with Channing Chapman.
Oh, Jenny.
In the that's a song we always sing. We were learning a group in the psychiatric hospital, the Tufts Medical Center, and I will go with it, and you can join. I think you all know it. It goes. It's a perfect also example of we combining Asian, Buddha's meditation, chanting, with chanting with music. May you be well and hold yourself in kindness. May you be loved and may you have peace. May we be well and hold ourselves in kindness. May we be loved and may we have peace. All right, until next time.
Play more music.
感谢你的收听，我们下一期不见不散。